All right, AP Human Geographers, let's talk a little bit about skills. Um, the old format of the AP test focused a lot on content, like your multiple choice questions, and a lot of your FRQ questions were reliant on your ability to memorize and recall content. Because the College Board knows that it can't fully prevent you from having your textbook next to you or looking things up on Google, the new format for 2020 is going to focus on application of the skills. Now, I have not been very specific about the skills that we've been working on all year, like I have about the content, right? In our PowerPoints, I put a lot about the content and the essential understandings and the essential knowledge, but I don't really discuss the skills. However, don't worry, we have been practicing them. So this is just a little overview of the skills they're going to be looking for. So these are the core skills. There's 5 categories. And even though it might look overwhelming at first, we've been doing this all year. So skills category 1 is concepts and processes. So they want you to analyze, and compare. Those types of prompts are going to be more important than the identify and define prompts this year. So analyze geographic theories, approaches, concepts, processes, or models. So this is where you look at the model and you analyze how it applies, right? We've done this a lot, even in our multiple choice work, right? When you take that von Thunen model and the bid rent graph and you analyze why things are where they are, that's what they're talking about here. So there are A through E of these skills: describe geographic concepts, processes, models, and theories. Right? So that's part of your content memory, to be able to describe what it is. And honestly, your FRQs often lack the describe part. Really start hammering into yourself that you want to explain it in your FRQ like you're explaining it to someone who has never heard of this stuff before. So don't explain it as if I'm going to read it. Explain it as if your parent who's never taken this class, or your math teacher, or somebody who has no concept of what AP Human Geography is, explain it to them, which means you have to teach it to them. The skill B is explain geographic concepts, processes, models, and theories. So describe and explain there, right? So these, you are noticing these are FRQ prompts. Compare them. So how could it, this won't be on the test because we're not doing industry and urban, but how could you compare von Thunen to Weber's least cost theory, and how did they influence each other, right? You won't get that opportunity, but how can you compare, say, the demographic transition model to the epidemiological transition model? I'm having trouble speaking today. So compare, describe, explain, compare all of these processes. So those are the first 3 skills. Then D is describe a relevant geographic concept, process, model, or theory in a specified context. So how does this model, process, or theory apply here? How is the epidemiological transition model applying in our current 21st century global academic world? How is the von Thunen concept applying to countries in the 21st century? What has changed, right? And then explain the strengths, weaknesses, and limitations of these models and theories. We've been doing this all year too, right? The problem with most of the models that we look at is that they're on a flat isotropic plane with no features, and the world is not flat. And so the models change depending on whether there's a hill or a river or a valley. A lot of the other models and descriptions, like the Wallerstein and Rostow, again, we won't have that because development is not on the test, don't look at all the sides of the way the world develops. They look at one specific part. And so, again, we've been explaining the strengths and weaknesses of a lot of these things as we've been going through. All right, spatial relationships. I think this one is going to be a big one. And this is one that we struggle with. Spatial patterns, networks, and relationships. Why are things where they are and how are they related? So if it's asking you about food deserts, which one of your practice FRQs in your FRQ bootcamp did, you want to make sure you make the relationship between where the stores are. Where the stores are isn't the only thing that matters. It also matters where the people are. So a food desert is not just there are no grocery stores. There are no grocery stores in the Gobi Desert, but it's not a food desert because nobody lives there. So a food desert is the relationship between grocery store locations and residential population distribution, right? And if there is a dense population core and no grocery stores, that's a food desert. It's a relationship. All right, 2B is explain the relationships. So why is it? 2C is explain a likely outcome in a geographic scenario using geographic concepts, processes, models, or theories. So you will take some kind of spatial relationship and explain what would happen if, right? 2D, explain the significance of geographic similarities and differences among different locations and or at different times. So let's think of population distribution, right? And population pyramids. So think of a population pyramid for, say, Bahrain. Bahrain is in the Middle East. It is heavy on males. Why is Bahrain heavy on males, right? And then look at maybe a population pyramid from a country that values male children over female children. And that pyramid will also skew heavy on the male, but not for the same reason, right? So there are similarities and differences. They might look the same, but a Bahrain reason for a heavy male cohort is not that there are more men born in that country. There are more men that come to that country to work. Does that make sense? I keep asking you questions like you're here. All right, 2E, explain the degree to which a geographic concept, process, model, or theory effectively explains geographic effects in different contexts and regions in the world. So here's the way it is in this place. Is there a geographic model or theory that we've talked about that explains why it is the way it is? Why is most of our national forest in America on the West Coast? Well, von Thunen explains why, right? Von Thunen, that forest ring, is where it is, right? And so we have the forest ring in the Appalachians in the middle of the country, and then another forest ring on the end of the country, right? And so why is that? And so you can take von Thunen and apply that. Why is Chicago, and again, you won't have this one because it's not cities, we're not doing urban, but why is Chicago structured the way it is? Well, the great answer to that one is Chicago was the basis for a lot of these city models that we have because it was closest to an isotropic plane as they had. And so you've got to take it, not just know what these models are, but be able to apply them in certain situations. I think spatial relationships, 2, is the hardest one. That's the hardest skill category for me. It's the one I struggle most with finding questions and ways for you to apply them. And so that's the one I'm going to be trying to concentrate on giving you practice on those because I don't think I've done a very good job through the year of giving you enough practice on skill category 2. All right, skill category 3, data analysis. We've done this a lot. Interpret quantitative geographic data represented in maps, tables, charts, graphs, satellite images, and infographics. Look at a graph and tell me what it is. What is the data, right? And I've said identify and define are not going to be on the test. But they might be, right? They might give you a map and ask you to identify what phenomenon there might be on the map, right? They might ask you to identify the reason for the phenomenon on the map. And so it's not, identify doesn't mean just define or be able to pull vocabulary out. Sometimes identify also means apply your knowledge. So even though I've said identify and define won't be on the test, there are some kinds of identify that might be, based on looking at a map or a graph or a chart and being able to analyze what information is there and explain it. Describe spatial patterns represented in maps and quantitative and geospatial data. So what are you seeing, right? And then explain what you're seeing. So remember we did that cartograph where China was really swollen, but the Middle East was barely existent, and it was in our agriculture unit. So, but depending on what the question is asking, you're looking at that map, trying to figure out what is happening more in China than in the Middle East. And without a lot of direction, you can come up with all sorts of guesses, right? But knowing if they give you the prompt that it's an agriculture situation, you got to go with, okay, what are they growing or producing more in China than they are in the Middle East, and why? Well, pigs, because Islam. Right? And so you look, that map can lead you to all sorts of conclusions, right or wrong. One of my favorite things to watch during this virus time is the conspiracy theories that are out there, right? And the most recent one that amuses me is the theory that it's 5G. 5G is causing this. And I saw somebody post a map of 5G locations in the United States next to a map of COVID cases in the United States. And there's a concentration on the eastern portion of the United States of COVID cases. There's also a concentration of 5G on the eastern portion of the United States. So the conclusion this person jumped to is it's 5G. But what conclusion should you jump to? Why is there more 5G on the eastern coast, eastern half of the United States? Well, we've talked about this a lot. I hope you're coming to the conclusion. Maybe pause it until you come up with an answer and then start again. That's where the population is. Our population density in the United States is on the East Coast. If you put the United States flat on a scale, it would lean this way because more people are over here in New York than are in California. Right, so 5G, of course, is going to be more prevalent over here because that's where the people are. They're putting the networks where the people are. And because there are more people over here, they're more contagious because they're interacting more, right? Because the people are there. So the maps mean something, but you have to really dig into the data analysis to understand what they mean. You can jump to all sorts of crazy conclusions. Do you remember the map we looked at right after the first unit? I think I showed you a map of the presidential election results where it looks like most of America is red. So it looks like the red team really won. But that map is based on land area, not people. When you change that map to be reflected by population density, the map looks a lot more even, right? The election was actually a lot closer than that first map implied because Montana is a huge space on the map, but there aren't that many people there. So reflecting that red won in that huge space is one thing, except reflecting that how many people actually made that state red changes the data. It also changes the scale, which we'll talk about in a second. So you want to explain and compare, right? Explain what maps or data imply or illustrate, right? What does this imply? This map of the lack of pigs in the Middle East, what does that imply? And what are the limitations? We haven't done this one very much. How could this map be misinterpreted? What is this map missing? What other information might you need? We did that a little bit in your Green Revolution essay where I asked you to identify a document that would strengthen your argument. What information are you missing and what is the limitation of what you're looking at? All data has limitation and all data can be construed or misconstrued depending on how it's presented. All right, source analysis. These are pictures and landscapes, right? So these picture prompts that we've been doing. So you want to be able to analyze and interpret qualitative. Remember, quantitative is data, qualitative is how things feel and look. So represent that image. What conclusion can you reach based on the photo? And then is that conclusion correct? If you put photo and data together, maybe a different conclusion would be reached. So sources analysis and data analysis are both very important for geography. So identify the different types of information presented in visual sources. When we were watching The World Makes a T-Shirt, I asked you to identify what they were using to mark their fields. And most of you immediately said, well, it's a John Deere app. But what is that John Deere app? What is it? Well, it's GPS. And more than that, it's probably GIS. It's probably layering other things over it too, right? GPS is where things are locationally in the world, but GIS layers that information over other layers of information. So identify what information you're getting from this satellite photo of the round fields, right? What is that information? And then describe the spatial patterns. Why are the fields round, right? Why are they spaced the way they are spaced? Why is that road pattern spaced the way it is? Why is the land parceling so weird looking, right? Let's talk about land parceling and meets and bounds. So if you see an aerial photograph of weird looking land parcels, it's probably a meets and bounds kind of division. If you see an aerial photograph of squares, it's probably township and range, right? Long things or long lot, yeah? Explain the patterns and trends and visual sources to draw conclusions. We did this on a lot of the multiple choice questions in on the agriculture test. And actually like 2 in a row for some of you when they got mixed up. Some of you got those 2 questions right in a row. When you look at long lots versus meets and bounds, which is better for transportation? And answer is long lots because of the access to the river. Everybody has fair access to that river, and water is the best way to transport things, the most efficient and inexpensive way. You want to compare those patterns and trends and sources to draw conclusions. You want to explain how maps and images and landscapes illustrate or relate to geographic principles. and explain possible limitations. So what are we not seeing in this picture, right? They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, but sometimes those words are a wrong conclusion. There's a very famous picture of Prince William in England, and it looks like he's flipping somebody off, giving somebody the bird from the angle they've taken it. But somebody else took a picture at the same time from the front, and he's got his whole hand out there, but from the side it looks like just his finger, by the way he's doing, right? And so the picture is not really telling the whole story. And so what is the limitation of what you're seeing? What is the limitation of the photograph or the illustration? All right, scale analysis. To me, scale analysis, spatial analysis, and data analysis are really going to be the bread and butter on this test. I'm not sure, but they are the most high-level thinking, and this test is going to go for your high-level thinking. So in scale analysis, remember we're talking about map scale, but we're also talking about scale of analysis. Those are slightly different. And if a question is asking you about a local scale, you need to answer in local scale. So you want to identify the scales of analysis presented by maps, quantitative and geospatial data images and landscapes. What is it showing you? Right? We've talked about this a couple times, or I've talked at you about it a couple times. When you look at the COVID virus worldwide, you see the global scale, right? But then if you start to zoom in on where the problems actually are, like in America, this map that made somebody think 5G was the reason, most of the COVID is happening on the eastern half of the United States, where the population density is. There aren't very many cases yet in Wyoming and Montana. When you looked at China as a whole, at first there was just this big red dot, right? But then as you zoomed in, most of that big red dot was in Hubei, and the rest of the provinces had little tiny red dots, right? So the scale of analysis is really important. You want to explain spatial relationships across various geographic scales using geographic concepts, processes, models, or theories. How did this virus spread? Why did it spread the way it spread, right? And so that's a spatial relationship. One of the reasons the virus has spread so drastically is our transportation corridors, right? Wuhan is a transportation hub, and so people were going in and out of there a lot before anybody knew the virus was a problem. The second highest number of infections in China was here in Shenzhen and Guangdong province because we are also a transportation hub. So people were flying in and out. The virus really started to take foot in Seattle, Washington first, because that's one place that a lot of people from Asia go through first. They fly to Seattle and then fly on to wherever they're going. And then New York, because as it was taking off in Italy, people stop in New York on their layover when they're getting themselves home. So these are the relationships across the scales. So you look at the world and then you focus in on Europe and then you focus in on Italy, and you see like in Italy there's a lot of Chinese business in northern Italy. So there was a lot of travel back and forth before the virus. We knew what the virus was. And so Italy was one of our first hotspots because of international business. So you want to compare that and explain it. And then the final one is explain the degree to which a geographic concept, process, model, or theory effectively explains geographic effects. So how does this theory, does this concept really explain what's happening? And so let's take functional nodes, right? So functional nodes and functional regions. You could apply functional regions on top of this kind of virus tracking and really kind of track what happened and where it might go next. And that's one of the things epidemiologists are doing right now. Right, so those are the skills. So it looked overwhelming when I first gave it to you, but really you know most of them. And again, spatial relationships, skill category 2 here. I've lost my mouse. But skill category 2 is the one that I think I've been weakest on in giving you practice. So I'm going to do my best in the next couple of weeks to find questions that focus on those skill categories. So here, let's do this. So Unit 1 at a glance. So then this PowerPoint and our CED goes on and says, here are the suggested skills that we hope you accomplish. And I'm not going to explain all of these because I've already explained them in the overview, but go through, this PowerPoint is up in the review section of Moodle, or it will be after I finish talking through it with you. So when you think of our topics and our important information, these are the suggested skills that they want you to apply to those topics and important informations. Yes? So screenshotted this from AP Classroom, and I know a lot of you have already found these practiced FRQs. These are from the assigned progress checks, which I just assigned to you. Again, all of that is optional. That is for your practice, but practicing is really, really, really going to help you. And so I've erased the question due to the attempt to keep these questions secure. But here's a map. So you've got a stimulus. This is a stimulus, and then you see something on the map. So you can already identify, okay, China, it's China. And then, so what might it be? And you have no idea, right? Except you've got a thing that says 1 million people. What kind of map is it? It's a dot distribution map. They're not going to ask you that anymore because you can look that up, right? But what do those dots represent? And then what kind of pattern does that represent? So these identify, where is my mouse? I wish I had a mouse. These identify, describe, and describe prompts from this FRQ are going to be application of your skills. And then over here on the right, you see the actual skills that this FRQ makes you apply. So every FRQ you answer is giving you practice in the skills that we just discussed. I don't think you can see this. This is the teacher view. But do know that when I assign you FRQs, I am tracking which skills you're practicing, so you're getting practice on those. But I want you to read through the skills and say to yourself, do I feel like I know this one? Does this one make sense to me? And again, I think our skills in category 2, I feel like I haven't done a very good job with that. But I think for the rest of the skill categories, I think we've gotten a lot of practice. So I want you to let me know if you disagree with that. Okay, and so the rest of this PowerPoint goes through the units and then the suggested skills, right? And so 2 doesn't come up very often. Here it is. Actually, it's pretty prominent in Unit 2, but the assignments I did didn't really attack those skills as much as I should have if I had known that the test was going to be what it is now. So you can go through this PowerPoint and look at these skills and kind of get your head around the fact that when you answer an FRQ, this is what they're looking for you to demonstrate. And so the explain and describe and not just tell me what happens, but tell me why it happens, and throw in AP Human Geography when you do that, right? And so I want you to go through this and look at all of these to see what you think. Now I gave you Unit 6 and Unit 7, you don't need them. This stuff is not going to be in there. There might be overarching concepts. If they ask a virus question, urban has a lot to do with that. They won't ask you anything directly about urban, but urban population density ties into population, which ties into disease infectious spread, right? Okay, so I want to make sure you know where this stuff is going to be. So here's my Moodle page, right? And down here is this FRQ Bootcamp. I have given you several. This was what we're supposed to be doing for the past 2 weeks. So if you open this past FRQ folder, you get all these instructions. So what I've given you here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 FRQs. So you can read the FRQ, write the FRQ, and then you've got the grading rubric in this PDF so that you can grade your own FRQ. And then you have 3 samples of other students, what they wrote, and then commentary from graders on how they graded what they wrote. And so if you make yourself go through all of these, and honestly, these ones that are more recent are more like the questions you'll see in 2020. These older ones are a little bit clunky. I put them in there because they had some concepts that I think were important, but the structure of FRQs starting in 2017 started to be a little bit different. So these last year I put in 4 from 2019 because those are the most like the types of questions you are likely to see in 2020. So this gives you practice on not only applying your content knowledge and applying your skill knowledge, but answering the question they ask, right? If they ask you to explain a consequence and you tell me what's different, you've not answered the question. A consequence is something that happened, right? It could be a positive, it could be a negative, but it's something that happened. And so you want to make sure you're reading really carefully to make sure you're answering the question that they ask. Yes? All right. And I hesitate to talk to you about AP Classroom because your AP Classroom looks a little bit different than mine. But in AP Classroom, and this is what I was trying to explain to you, there are FRQs that should be available to you. and I don't, I tried to tell you how to find them, but a couple of you have contacted me and telling me they're not there. And if you still can't find them, give me a call on Teams and then we can share your screen and I can see if I can help you find them. I am frustrated with AP Classroom. The good thing about this, though, is that it gives you the rubric when you're done, so I hear, so that you can grade how you did, and then it allows me to sometimes grade them, right? So I've graded these ones that are dark blue, I've graded. These ones that are light blue, somebody's writing right now, right? I'm not going to have, if all of you do all of these, I'm not going to have time to grade them all. It takes me a long time to grade FRQs and give you feedback. But I will do as much as I can to give you feedback on how you're doing, but you can also give yourself feedback. And these are practices. I have also given you assignments of the progress checks. And so this website is so slow. So in this week, I've assigned 5 different FRQs as progress checks. Again, they are optional. You don't have to do them, but they are really, really, really good practice. And so here we go. So these are some of your optional ones and some of the real ones. So when you go into AP Classroom, and you need to visit AP Classroom between now and the test, and you need to start accessing AP Classroom because that is where all of the best review is going to be. You also need to visit the AP Human Geography YouTube page. They are putting up review videos. So this one, Unit 1, Population is up, Culture is up, Part 1 of Agriculture is up, and then these are going to go live later this week. So these are AP teachers that are directly affiliated with College Board, so they know better than I do what College Board is looking for. They've actually talked to College Board and helped design this course. So whereas I'm reading the CED and trying to guess at what they mean and what's important, they actually know what's important. So these are not, they're long, they're 45 minutes, but they will be really, really useful for you to just plug into and make sure what they're saying matches what we've been learning. And if they're saying anything, I haven't had time to listen to them yet, I plan to do that over the weekend. But if they're saying anything that's new or different, they're right and I'm wrong, right? So take what they say, that is your best review. Hopefully, we're close. Hopefully these teachers and I are close. But if we're not, I'm the one that's wrong. They're the ones that are right because these people are working for the College Board. They know exactly what they're doing. If you cannot get to YouTube, I'm trying to upload something right now. I have a channel in Stream. And I hope you all know how to access Stream. And I have been like crazy uploading videos so you can access things without a VPN. But in Stream, if you go to the AP Human Geography channel, my channel, I've downloaded the ones that are up and put them on Stream. So if you don't have YouTube, you can still get to these reviews. And I strongly, strongly encourage you to listen to the reviews, to add to your notes, or to reorganize your notes, and to make this a part of your life for the next couple of weeks. All right, I am certainly going to give you more updates as I get more information about this test. And do make sure you are getting emails from the College Board. Go into your spam folder, go into your other inbox, check with the College Board to see what email you're using because they're starting to send you things and everything about the test is going to come to that email. So the practice, when you get to practice how it was going to work to upload and how it's going to feel to take the test, all those practice things and the video tutorials about how to do it are going to come to your email. And I won't get them. So if you ask me questions, I'm really not going to know what you're talking about. Luckily, I have an AP student living with me. Cameron has taken AP World, so I might know what it looks like when he does it. But as a teacher, I'm not able to see what you see, so it's hard for me to tell you what to do. So those emails from AP Central are going to be very important for you to tune into. All right? Okay. Have a good week.